Yo, Alex here. This is the iQOO Neo9S Pro, essentially a Neo 9 Pro with a slightly higher clocked Dimensity 9300 Plus chipset. I was unable to properly test the Neo 9 Pro previously because I had to return it due to a hardware issue, so I kinda wanted to give it a try again now that there is a newer version. In particular, I wanted to try how well the Dimensity 9300 Plus performs when it comes to gaming, since I've heard a lot of good things about it in that regard. So let's dive right in. First of all, when playing Genshin at the new highest render resolution settings, I'm only getting 810p rather than the 864p I got on the iQOO 12. No idea why, but perhaps iQOO did some optimizations on FunTouch OS for the global version of the game. But 810p still looks noticeably better than 720p, and on a screen this size, the difference between 810p and 864p isn't as noticeable. And just like on the Neo 9 Pro, features like running the game at 900p and frame interpolation isn't available on the global version of Genshin when using Origin OS, which is a shame. Anyway, when running my usual 30 minutes test with the graphics maxed out, it's still able to maintain mostly 60 FPS aside from a very few minor FPS dip here and there, nothing major that would affect gaming experience. Even during the Spiral Abyss section, which is usually the most taxing part of the test since it includes a lot of skill effects and elemental reactions that have to be rendered on demand, it was able to maintain the temperature and smoothness quite well. The phone was only a bit warm and never got too hot. I am using the balanced performance setting, and I did have a small fan blowing towards the back of the phone at the lower speed so my hands don't get too sweaty, but this was at room temperature with no air conditioning, and the phone is in a TPU case, so I still think that this is a pretty impressive result. For Honkai Star Rail, it is actually able to maintain more or less 60 FPS in max graphics if you're using a thermoelectric cooler or have a fan blowing at the back of the phone constantly. This is similar to the iQOO 12 with Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, but personally, I recommend just dropping the graphics a little instead. The game will run smoother, the phone won't heat up as much, and battery drain will be much lower. The experience will still be excellent since the difference in graphics won't be as noticeable on a screen this size. When it comes to battery drain while gaming, it's pretty good as well, and again pretty similar to what I get on the iQOO 12. I know it might seem like it's a little more power hungry considering the render resolution as well as battery size, but because battery drain can be affected by so many components on the phone, the difference is not big enough that I can definitively say that one chipset is better than the other. Even in day-to-day usage, I was expecting the core design of the Dimensity 9300 Plus to result in noticeably worse battery life, but in the end, it's about the same for me as well, and I can still easily get through a full day of usage just fine. So overall, the Dimensity 9300 Plus is indeed pretty good, not just for gaming, but also just general usage. It's pretty much on par with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 on the iQOO 12 based on my own experience using both devices as my main phone. I'm sure if you nitpick, there will be some differences here and there, and I've heard some folks mentioning that the Dimensity 9300 Plus doesn't handle emulators as well. I don't use emulators, so I can't comment on that, but at least in my own day-to-day usage, I haven't encountered any differences that are big enough. So yeah, I'm pretty impressed by what MediaTek has achieved here with the Dimensity 9300 Plus, and I hope that they'll be able to keep this up in the future, because having more competition in the market is always a good thing for us consumers. So going back to basics, the phone itself is fairly lightweight thanks in part to the plastic frame, and it's a clean looking design which I actually like more than the iQOO 12. The smaller camera bump makes it nicer to hold while gaming as well. It's using an LTPO screen, which is starting to become a lot more common these days, and it does get bright enough outdoors, though not as bright as the OnePlus Ace 3. It's not the best looking screen I've seen, but it's not bad for the price either. Plus, it has high frequency PWM dimming in low brightness, which is nice. The speakers and haptics are pretty decent, but still not quite as good as the iQOO 12. The fingerprint sensor is a little on the lower side, but maybe because the phone is lighter, it doesn't feel as cumbersome to use. Software-wise, I've already had the chance to use Origin OS earlier this year, so I kinda already knew what to expect. It's very customizable, very responsive, has a modern looking design, and has a lot of nice features. I don't understand why Vivo stuck with FunTouch OS for their global market, because it's so much worse than Origin OS. Less features, less granular controls over app permissions, doesn't look as good, doesn't perform as well, and is just generally more restrictive. Useful features like this gesture to minimize an app into a window, or even basic stuff like having a large folder on the home screen. Origin OS is so customizable that you can even change the way the control center works if you prefer the more traditional style. Even when it comes to bloatware, I can remove most of the apps I don't want on Origin OS, but on FunTouch OS, there are a bunch of apps that simply can't be removed. Personally, I can deal with not having things like Android Auto, Nearby Share, or Google Location History, so I vastly prefer Origin OS over FunTouch OS. It's pretty easy to install the Play Store as well, since it's just inside their own App Store, and it already has basic Google services built in. So please Vivo, why not just use Origin OS for global markets? In terms of camera performance, it's good for the price, but that's about it. I know the hardware specs look decent, but being a cheaper mid-range device, they're not going to give it the best lenses or image processing. This is most obvious when comparing it against the iQOO 12 in low light. Anyway, this is pretty much the same for most other phones in this price range, so just have a look at these camera samples and see for yourself if it's good enough for your needs. At the end of the day, while Dimensity 9300 Plus isn't quite the Dragon Slayer that I hoped it would have been, it's still a very competent chipset that I think can at least fight to a draw against the rather snappy Dragon. The phone itself is quite nice to use as well and is quite well rounded. I really like the design of the phone, the hardware is great for the price, and the software experience is really good too. I'll even go as far as to say that Origin OS is my favorite Android OS in the market at this point in time. And if you want better build quality, camera performance, haptics, speakers, on top of excellent gaming performance, there is the more expensive iQOO 12 as well, which is also a really good phone. But because those things are not as important to me, I find the cheaper Neo9S Pro a lot more appealing. Plus, it's a lighter phone as well, which I prefer. That said, despite really liking this phone, it's not something that I can just recommend to anyone since it is a China-only device. Aside from the lack of certain Google-specific features, there are certain apps and services that will still be in Chinese, and there is no way to guarantee that all the apps you need will be able to run properly. So in the end, the only way to know if it works for you is still to try the device yourself. But for what it's worth, amongst the handful of devices I've tried this year, this is probably my favorite so far.